Welcome back to the Extra Zone Arcade. The Mario 40th Anniversary Superspective has officially made the transition to 3D. Okay, that was a lot less impressive than I was hoping it would be, which will kind of become a running theme this episode, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Today's episode is all about Super Mario 64, the series' first true jump into 3D. It's a game often heralded for redefining the platformer for a new generation, and new perspective. It's also still considered by many to be one of, if not the best 3D Mario game. But a common thing I noticed is that this is usually the sentiment of those above the age of 25. As someone who grew up mostly in the following two generations, does this game actually hold up? Or does Super Mario 64 not live up to all the hype? So, how did we go from this to this? Well, it all started with this. Wow, this looks horrible. But they had to start somewhere. Using the full power of the Super Nintendo's Super Effects capabilities, Star Fox was a game made to look as if it were in 3D. This would pretty much kickstart Nintendo's first idea for a 3D Mario game, which would enter development in late 1994. Tons of different iterations were developed by Nintendo EAD, with one of these concepts being an isometric game like Super Mario RPG. Their direction changed pretty quickly once the idea of a more open-ended game with free roaming controls started to float around. And so in November of 1995, a demo for this new 3D Mario experience was available at that year's Space World event. Think E3 but entirely centered around Nintendo games and consoles. Though players wouldn't get their hands on this new hotness for anywhere between 7 months to around a year and a half later depending on where you lived. There actually ended up being a delay to streamline the game's content and polish up what was left in, which also delayed the release of the Nintendo 64 as a whole. They were not going to release this thing if Mario wasn't ready to go along with it. Smart move. But would the world really be ready for something like this? I mean, they were only about to release their most experimental and innovative game yet. It was going to be so full of details and expression to really make it feel as if you're playing an interactive 3D cartoon. They even spent months refining the character control and camera movement, going as far as to include drop shadows for every object regardless of lighting, all in the name of much easier and more fun gameplay. They needed this to work. Mario 64 was not just going to revolutionize 3D gaming, it was going to make sure that it was here to stay. Koji Kondo came back to make more incredible music for the game, and Yoji Inagaki brought the sound design to life. But wait! We need to bring Mario's sound to life as well. He needs a voice. Let's see. We had this guy voice his disembodied head in an educational spin-off game.
I'ma bet you can't do this. Whee!
Yeah, this is perfect. Little did they know just how iconic that voice would become with this game. All of this came to a head with the game's release in Japan in June of 1996, September of the same year in North America, and in the spring of 1997 for Europe. The game was instantly met with overwhelming praise for pretty much changing the landscape of gaming forever, with its graphics, sound, gameplay and design all being praised for transitioning the series perfectly into 3D. But how true really is that? Well, let's talk about it. Right off the bat, I need to disclose that my first experience with this game was nearly 20 years after it released. It was November of 2015. I was just finishing up school for the day with history class, excited because I would be given some Nintendo eShop funds later that day for good performance. I wanted to use it on the recently released Cloud Strife DLC character in Super Smash Bros. And spend the rest on a virtual console game. I wanted to go with Mario 64, since it was a game I heard so many great things about. I was pretty savvy on the YouTube gaming community at the time, mainly Nintendo games of course. So I would often hear about how Mario 64 was revolutionary and genre-defining and one of the best games of all time. Needless to say, I was super excited about the prospect of finally getting to play this legendary game. So, I got the game that cloudy, chilly and dry afternoon and played it for about 2 hours and absolutely hated it. Although it wasn't because I thought it was bad, I just thought, this is one of the best Mario games? And that, folks, is what we call disappointment. I honestly kinda felt scammed. I just did not get it. And so seeking validation, I looked online to see if there were others who felt the same way I did. And yeah, no, it was pretty sparse. I would search Mario 64 on YouTube to see the results flooded with videos praising the game, and the word nostalgia coming up in almost every single one of them. It felt like this was some kind of troll, but no, it was very real. People just love this game, and I didn't get it at all. So I basically came to the conclusion that people only liked the game because it's nostalgic. They grew up with it and don't like the newer stuff as much because they don't have that attachment. So I dropped the game completely and was so bummed out by feeling like I wasted my money on a bad game that I didn't touch it for another 5 years. If you've seen the previous episodes, you'll know that this is when I started to play through every mainline Mario game to completion. After beating it, well, I still didn't like it. I'd gotten over my angsty teen saltiness from 2015, but the game just still didn't click for me. I thought it was janky, the camera was god-awful, the level design was uninspired, and the game just felt like a poorly aged mess. But I beat it, so at least I took solace in that. Fast forward 3 years and I played through the game again while marathoning all mainline Mario games. This time it was in the form of a little live stream series called the Mariothon. These were my closing thoughts on the game after my second full playthrough.
I do have to say, I came out of this a lot more positive than I went in. Yes, the controls are frustrating and very dated. Yes, the camera is very frustrating and dated. Sometimes the level design's a little iffy. Some levels are definitely better than others. Yeah, no, I think I came out of this, with a bit of a new appreciation for this game. So I'm glad that I was able to revisit it and have that experience. It's still not my favorite. I'd probably say this is still my least favorite 3D Mario game, which is good because this is the first one. So it shows that they only just got better from here. So hey, and this game has its fans. Like, it has its fans for a reason. It's not a bad game at all. And, I imagine if I grew up with it, I'd probably love the hell out of this game. It'd probably be one of my favorites, if anything, but I didn't. And going back to it after playing some of the newer games was difficult. Yeah, so I never quite got the love that this game always received. I knew that it was important. I knew this game was a big deal, and it still is. Like, this revolutionized 3D gaming. Like, we wouldn't have any of the games we've got today without Mario 64. Like, if this game never came out and was as successful as it was, like, there just wouldn't be games just wouldn't be how it is now. And you have to respect it for that. So regardless of how you feel about it personally. So yeah, I'll always respect it on that level. But it just never was one of my favorites.
To me, the game still couldn't live up to its legacy, but I at least started to understand why it was loved a little more. But how about now? Well, as soon as you boot the game up, you're literally greeted by Mario, and what follows is a pretty unsettling model of Mario's head jumping at you. You can move and contort it to your heart's content. Look at this absolute monstrosity I created. He's beautiful. You can choose from 4 files, and when you select a clean one, you're treated to an opening cutscene. Peach has written a letter. Oops, wrong one. Here it is. Peach has written a letter to Mario to come over for some cake. Ignoring the implications of a booty call, we quickly assume the perspective of Lakitu holding a camera as our main man jumps out of a warp pipe. Heading into Peach's castle, an ominous message from Bowser echoes through, taunting us about the capture of the princess. Even with a whole new axis added to the picture, some things will just never change. So, it's Mario's job to free his friends trapped in the castle walls by heading into the paintings that house various worlds. Eventually, you make it up to Bowser's base in the sky and take him out, recovering the star's power to the castle and saving everyone trapped within it, including the princess herself. Peace is returned and Peach gets ready to bake Mario a cake. Wait, just a damn moment. Didn't she send a letter at the beginning of the game saying she baked a cake? As in past tense, it's already been made? And here she is saying, let's bake a cake as if there isn't one already done. Either she never baked the cake in the first place, or she forgot about it and baked a second one anyway? I don't know. But yeah, that's the plot. You can get some additional lore by talking to the different NPCs in the game, but for one thing, this font is very obnoxious and hard to read, and 2, these characters yap. And I mean yap. They will describe something very simple to you in the most excruciatingly detailed way possible. So I just skip through pretty much all the dialogue. Later games do a much better job at just getting to the point. So I think it's about time we talk about the gameplay. The most important aspect of any platformer, and the thing that probably put me off the most at first. After playing the game all the way through and even 100%ing it this time, yeah, honestly, not that bad. I think I may have gone through this thing called character development. That said, I still have my issues with it. Running around mostly feels alright, and Mario has a good acceleration curve here. It's all pretty responsive, but turning can be difficult for a couple reasons. One of those being that sometimes when turning, Mario won't turn around on an axis like normal, but instead make a half circle to face the direction you input. I don't think I need to explain why this can be problematic in a game where most of the levels are suspended above a bottomless pit. The other reason turning is difficult is because even if you do make a clean axis turn, Mario will start building momentum right away, so he'll inch forward just a little every time. Again, this could end up being just enough to send you plummeting to an early grave. Honestly though, that's the worst of it. The game actually feels really satisfying if you can get into a good flow with things. Chaining actions together like a triple jump into a dive can feel great, and maintaining your speed can feel like a fun challenge in certain levels. This game has an extremely prevalent speedrunning community even to this day, and it's all because of the freedom and flow of movement here. Seriously, if you've heard of Mario 64 for whatever reason, there's a good chance it's from seeing how speedrunners turned it inside out. Really fascinating stuff too, I would highly recommend learning about it if you're in the rabbit hole mood. Anyway, Mario has a bunch more moves here, including that aforementioned triple jump and dive. The former lets you jump higher and higher with each consecutive jump after landing on the ground, and the latter can be done in mid-air to cover larger distances. You can also clear large gaps with the long jump, which takes Mario's iconic jumping prowess and puts it all into a horizontal leap. The backflip can be useful for reaching higher ledges without needing to build speed, and the side flip is the best way to start a wall kick. Wall kicks let you scale up 2 adjacent walls to reach much higher areas, and the ground pound introduced in Yoshi's Island is back and adapted into Mario's kit. Best for smashing grounded objects or cancelling your momentum in mid-air. There are also a bunch more moves like the punch string, slide tackle and sweep kick that are supposed to be used in combat. Keyword being supposed, because you're rarely ever going to bust one of these out unless you're just trying to bust a move. Oh, and he can crawl. Actually, I found this was pretty useful when moving across thinner platforms, since I can't trust the regular ground control enough to get me through those. That's what it comes down to for me. I feel like the controls are serviceable, and even a lot of fun in the more grounded levels like Bob-omb Battlefield or Hazy Maze Cave. When we get to some of the more perilous levels like Tick-Tock Clock and Rainbow Ride, it starts to fall apart because it's just so imprecise. I'm constantly afraid Mario's just gonna kinda do what he wants and I'll die for it. Basically, this game's controls are much like an abusive relationship. I would definitely recommend running around Peach's castle to get to grips with it and learning how each move works before jumping into the real action. As our first real hub world in the series, this is actually still one of the best. Running around outside is a lot of fun, even if there really isn't anything else to do, and the presentation is great throughout. The castle is set up into 4 main areas, those being the foyer, basement, second floor and attic. There are paintings strewn about the place that when jumped into will send you into one of the game's 15 courses. Some of these are definitely not made equally, because there's a pretty stark difference between quality for a lot of these courses. The first course, Bob-omb Battlefield, is by far one of the best levels in the game, and serves as an amazing introduction to the whole experience. It does a great job of teaching you the mechanics through context, and is rewarding to explore beyond the beaten path that is your main objective. The music is iconic and shows you right out the gate, literally, one of this game's biggest strengths. You can get any star in pretty much any order as long as you have the means to obtain them. Only 70 of the game's 120 power stars are needed to get to Bowser and see those credits roll, so you have the freedom to pick and choose what missions you want to do. This would be how I usually played through it, right up until I decided that for this series I would 100% complete all the games. So unfortunately I couldn't just skip over Rainbow Ride like I usually do. But the option is there for those of you who don't feel like going all the way, and that's always a positive in my opinion. Generally speaking, the level design doesn't do too much for me. The Super Mario series was gradually building its design to feel more and more diegetic with each entry. Mario World felt like the real culmination of this, with the levels blending seamlessly with the world and feeling less like they're just obstacle courses for Mario to get through. That all but went out the window here. But to be fair, doing what World did in 3D wasn't exactly possible. At least not in this format. Games like Crash Bandicoot managed this nicely, but that was because of the much more linear and railroaded design approach. The result of this is that a lot of the levels, as I said earlier, end up just being challenges over an endless abyss. I think you could explain it thematically as just being representations of those paintings brought to life. Maybe each of the paintings houses its own dimension, which is where the courses take place. Or maybe this is all just a massive stretch. Anyway, later 3D games will do a much better job with this, most notably, the next game we're going to be talking about. Sub up and stay tuned for that. Judging the courses for what they are, I would say my favourites were Whomp's Fortress and Hazy Maze Cave. Whomp's Fortress has some of the most fun stars in the game because there are at least a handful of them you can do in your own way. My favourite being Shoot into the Wild Blue, since you can do it without using the cannon with a well-placed wall kick. Hazy Maze Cave was the level that felt the most diegetic, which, like we established, isn't super common in this game. Great theming and had some really fun missions like Metalhead Mario Can Move. What the hell does that mean? Well, this mission requires the Metal Cap to navigate the underwater cavern and find a secret room housing the star. The Metal Cap is essentially one of this game's power-ups, which pretty much makes you invincible. You can also walk underwater and get through jet streams no problem due to the weight increase. This power-up would eventually kinda become something of its own character, with the first instance of Metal Mario as a separate entity being only around 3 years after this game. Then from Smash Bros, he would later become playable in a handful of Mario Kart games. I wonder if they'll ever expand on this idea in universe. The most notable power-up from this game though would have to be the wing cap. It's the one you see front and center on the box art and features the most throughout the game. Honestly, I don't like it all that much. Metal Mario makes you feel badass and unstoppable, but the wing cap just feels like I'm driving drunk. Not that I would know anything about that because I don't drink or drive, but it's what I'd imagine it's like. Wing Mario over the rainbow is the best example of this. Turning feels super clunky and you lose momentum so fast if you mess up your glide even just a little bit. It just never felt all that satisfying or intuitive to use. Then, there's the invisible cap, which you'll almost never use. I could count maybe 3 missions in the entire game where you need it, and one of those is the one which you unlock it. All it lets you do is phase through certain walls and gates. So yeah, less than impressive selection this time, but power-ups in 3D Mario would struggle to find their footing for a while. We'll get to why that is as the series continues. There are also some less than impressive stages in this game, with the worst being Snowman's Land and Rainbow Ride. Rainbow Ride really just comes down to the difficulty. Expecting the player to commit to these life or death platforming segments with these controls is just way too much to ask. And that's the entire level. It is one of the last in the game, but it just feels nerve-wracking for all the wrong reasons. Snowman's Land just has some truly terrible missions, like Into the Igloo, which has a section where you can get softlocked for using the invisible cap. Why even put something like this here? The red coin mission sucks for a similar reason, because there are a couple you can only access by making it up this ledge. To do that, you need to spin jump off these spin drifts, and it is way too easy to mess this up by either getting a bad bounce, or if they happen to go too deep into the water. They also don't respawn once jumped on, so you gotta restart the whole mission if you mess up. With these two pale in comparison to what I think is one of the worst design levels in a Mario game. It's Tiny Huge Island. Yeah, not gonna lie, I usually skip over this one, maybe doing 1 or 2 missions, but holy shit it sucks to navigate. In Tiny mode, take my critique of Rainbow Ride and turn it up to 11 because all you get here is spindly ass platforms that I can only crawl across to feel safe. Giant mode isn't too bad, but the layout of this stage is just so awkward and you don't get nearly the freedom of movement you do in other courses like it. The missions themselves are pretty uninspired for this point in the game, like there isn't really anything here we haven't seen before. The only exception being the 100 coin stuff for just how abysmal and time consuming this was. A really cool gimmick with so much potential that was just entirely fumbled by awful execution. The camera feels like it's at its most egregious here. Yeah, nah, I wasn't just gonna let this one off with a slap on the wrist. The camera in this game is genuinely horrible and probably the worst out of its 3D platforming contemporaries. It's almost always at some awkward ass angle, gets caught behind things a lot and loves to fight you at pivotal moments. Moving this thing is a task of extreme resolve in and of itself, and most of the time it'll just automatically pan to whatever shitty angle the game decides to give you. Other times it'll just straight up bug out, like here in the iRock boss fight. Speaking of bosses, this game has quite a few, and there's actually some good variety here. Big Bob-omb shows us that it's a throw or be thrown world for the very first mission of the game. As to be expected, he doesn't put up much of a fight, but I could see it being frustrating having to climb back up the mountain if he manages to throw you off the top. The Womp King is upset about the racial inequality of the Mushroom Kingdom, so we ground pound the man to death for another easy star. Something about that feels wrong. Big Boo returns from Super Mario World and shows up for 3 different missions in Big Boo's horn. Ground pound him to put the spirit to rest once and for all. iRock, who I already mentioned, is one of Nintendo's many iconic giant hand bosses. He'll try to squash you or shove you off the stage, so keep your wits about you in this battle. As you flood his home in Tiny Huge Island, Wiggler gets real mad and tries to take you out. He's pretty easily dealt with, just 3 jumps and it's over. So yeah, the bosses aren't too difficult, but at least each of them is fought in a unique way, which is something I couldn't really say about the 2D games up to this point. The big guy himself, Bowser, is back and looking, not so great. Mario pulls off the polygonal look, but Bowser might need a bit of a facelift because I'm not feeling this one at all. Anyway, you fight him 3 times, the first of which is very unimpressive. You only need to swing him by the tail once to hit one of the surrounding bombs and send him packing. The second fight is the same deal, but he at least has some new moves in this encounter like teleportation and rocking the arena with a huge jump. The final fight is where it gets interesting, as he takes 3 hits to beat this time. His attacks gradually get more intense until the final phase, where the platform breaks apart into a star shape, making the situation much more precarious. Once he's been dealt with for the last time, the castle, princess and Toads have all been freed and the game ends on another job well done. Your 100% completion reward is that you get a visit from Yoshi atop the castle. He'll give you 99 lives, a message from the developer, and then off himself? Okay. This interaction also unlocks the sparkling triple jump, which doesn't really do anything different, but it looks cool. So that's Super Mario 64. It's a game that I think is defined by the sum of its parts. It's easy to disregard it just because of how archaic and at times frustrating it is to play today, but I think I get it now. After a decade of confusion and disappointment surrounding this game's reception online, it makes sense to me. This game evokes a feeling that could have only been captured because of when it came out. That sense of discovery and charm for really being the first of its kind is something no other game in this series could capture. Be it the limited but very striking visuals or iconic soundtrack, there's a lot that keeps this title a memorable one. The presentation as a whole was leaps and bounds above other games at the time, and they really made full use of the N64's more impressive 3D capabilities when compared to Sony's PlayStation and Sega's Saturn. If this game got anything right, it's absolutely the impression it makes on the player. Even if neither of those aspects are particularly impressive now, and there are parts of the game that just look straight up ugly now, there's a reason many would consider this an aesthetic. It's more than just the outward appearance, but the feeling. That is why Super Mario 64 is loved. But no matter what I do, I just can't get that feeling for the simple fact that I don't have that attachment to it. I grew up with games from the GameCube and Wii era. It's harder for me to look at this game in the context of when it came out, what it meant at the time, and how it impacted those who played it, because I just wasn't there. And at that, I first played it as a teenager, so I was a lot less willing to look at the game for what it meant and took it as what I played. A janky game that aged poorly and has almost no pull to go back to it even after all these years. That first impression is something I don't believe I'll ever be able to shake, but I've certainly loosened up over subsequent playthroughs. I never thought I'd actually go through with 100%ing it, but here we are. I've truly given this game the fairest of shakes I possibly could, and you know what? I appreciate this thing a lot more now as a result. I'd even go as far as to say it is a good game. Not great, obviously, there's still way too much I just can't get behind, but I have the full experience now, and with it, a newfound respect for this game. Ultimately, this game has a legendary story behind it. The trials and tribulations that came with developing a game that would break into uncharted territory. Did this small team of 15 to 20 staff members know they were creating history? That, for better or worse, the entire landscape of an industry would shift forever? Well, it did. And regardless of the fact that I'm not super enthusiastic about it, Super Mario 64 will forever be one of the most important games to ever release. Much like Mario himself, Nintendo took a leap and stuck the landing, with this game getting perfect reviews almost unanimously. It would go on to be the Nintendo 64's best-selling game with over 11 million copies sold. That might seem a bit lower than the previous entries, but bear in mind that the N64 sold significantly less than the prior consoles. Yeah, despite how impressive this game and the console itself was, no one could beat the juggernaut that was the PlayStation. Nintendo sticking to cartridges would limit third-party support when compared to the much more easily developed disc-based games of the competition. Hell, they even lost to the Saturn in Japan, which secured Nintendo a solid third-place medal in the country. The only time this would ever happen in the 42 years since the family computer's release. Still, they had something that would capture the hearts and minds of many around the globe, and is still considered one of the greatest to ever do it. This game's enduring culture, from playground rumors about an unlockable Luigi to the insane speedrunning community, is unlike that of any other game in the series. And for that, Mario 64 will always be remembered.
Come on. Come on, Mario. Come on, Mario, jump! Don't give up.
Want to grow? The calcium in milk helps bones grow.
Okie dokie.
And that, folks, is another episode of the Mario 40th Anniversary Superspective for the books. I know I might catch a little heat for this one just because of how passionate this game's community is, but remember, this is only my opinion. If you love the game, that's awesome. Feel free to let me know what it means to you in the comments. In the end, I still want to understand better why this game is still lauded to this day. If you enjoyed this video, don't worry, this is a whole series that already has 5 previous episodes and a lot more on the way. Subscribe, like and share so that you don't miss a single part. Next, we're gonna see the sunshine. Until then, have a good one.